Welcome back, FC26 fans. Today we will do a real-time installation tutorial of all the essential FC26 mods. I've left links to these mods in the description. I have also left a link to the FIFA Mod Manager tool, which is what we will be using to install and boot the game from. I have already installed this tool in my folder, and I've left a shortcut to it on the desktop. Now, you can download the FIFA Mod Manager and place it anywhere you like on your PC so long as you have the space for it, and place your shortcut to it on your desktop to make life easier. Now over here I have a file structure I have left a link in the description for. This will be empty folders for you to place your mods in just to keep things a little more organized. And under here is all the RAR folders and zipped folders of the FC26 mods we are going to be installing. They are all the essential ones, and I have linked to those in the description also. First of all, some of these are paid mods. I'm not going to get into that conversation, it's up to you whether you want to pay for those or not. Secondly, I'm going to assume you know how to extract RAR and zipped files. This won't be a tutorial on that. You can find plenty of tutorials online how to extract zipped folders. It's very easy, but I'm going to assume you have intermediate PC skills. You've gotten this far because you want to mod your game. And I'm going to assume you have experience with file management in regards to modding PC games. So first of all, download the FC26 mods file structure here, which will contain these empty folders, and place them in a location of your choosing. I have mine sitting directly on my D drive, which is where I keep all of my games and all of my modded folders. What I'm going to do, I'm going to take these mods and place them in their respective folders, and I'm going to extract them. Some of these will be password protected, and you can find those passwords in their relevant Discord servers once you become a Patreon member of said mod. What I'm going to do, start with the Anthony James gameplay mod and drag that into the gameplay folder. eSim, the Realism mod, and the Road Kit expansion mod, I will drop into the patches folder, as these are basically all-in-one patches that contain a lot of the essential assets, graphical changes, as well as databases for our FC mods. Sound mods, such as the Anthem and Gold Song mod, I'm going to place in sounds. Marconis mods, which consists of goal nets and in-game generated mini-face mods, I'm going to place under graphics. And finally, there is this little folder here called separators. I'm going to drag this into graphics as well, just for the ease and simplicity of it. I'll explain more about separators later. What I'm going to do is go into all of these folders and extract these RAR files, and I'll come back in just a moment with the extracted folders and show you how we're going to install them in the FIFA Mod Manager. And we are back. I have extracted all of the relevant mod files into their respective mod folders. Let's go in and take a look. The Anthony James gameplay mod, I've extracted this. What I tend to do, I go and delete the original RAR files just to keep everything nice and organized. We go in here and we'll delete the Marconis and the separators zip folders, and the same with all of these patch folders here, just so they don't get in the way. Something I forgot to show you was in the tools folder is where I keep my mod manager and my editor tool. What we can do, we can start in here with the mod manager. I've already sent a shortcut to this to my desktop. Follow what I do here, right click, and depending on your operating system, if you're on Windows 10, this will appear. If you're on Windows 11, you may have to go into show more options and then send to desktop. If I go to my desktop, you will see I've created another shortcut here. I already have one here, so I don't need this one anymore. I'm going to open the FIFA Mod Manager, If this is your first time, this is what you will see. You'll have to set the game path, which it should automatically find. Go ahead and highlight this. Select Make Default and press Select. What will happen, we'll have a blank interface, and most of you may already have Mod Manager installed and may already be familiar with it. However, starting over, we're going to ensure it all runs smoothly and assume this is your first time installing an FC26 mod. Click down here and click on Import Mods, and then we find our FC26 mods folder. As you see, here is the file folder path I mentioned earlier in the video. First thing we'll do is go ahead and install the FIFER Realism mod, which is probably the most essential. Now of course we're on Alpha 4, the most important thing with FC26 modding is you want to make sure that your game is up to date, and you want to make sure that the mods correspond to the correct title update of your FC26 game. We are currently on title update 1.2.1. Most mods will have this listed accordingly. You'll get used to the correspondence of the mod versions and the game's title update version. If the versions aren't correct, then the mod most likely will not work. Let's go back to the mod manager. We're going to start with Realism mod. When you enter this folder, you will see a few subfolders and mod files. Now all of these are fine to highlight here: face updates, graphics, manager faces, menu mod, new faces, tattoos, and the main Realism mod, which basically contains all of the database stuff. Click open and we simply wait for the mod manager to install them one by one. Back in the day, previous mod manager versions on previous FC titles would be quite a long process. One of the improvements they've made with the FC26 mod manager is that it installs files a lot quicker. We can see the mod manager has installed the Realism mod main mod files here. We can go ahead and highlight all of these by holding Ctrl and clicking on them. Or you could simply hold Ctrl and A on your keyboard to highlight them all simultaneously. Next up, we go down to here and press Apply Mods. They'll appear in the Applied Mods section on the right. The next thing we need to note is, even though the mod manager does launch the game in offline mode, I like to make sure. So I'm going to go down to my EA app. You can currently see the app is in online mode as the storefronts and the relevant games interface appears. The game will try to boot in online mode. The mod manager will try its best to cancel this out and launch it offline so there's no conflicts with automatically downloaded squad updates when you boot the game up. This may cause compatibility issues. So, I make sure by going on the 3 dashes and I click Go in offline mode. It might tab out of the EA app, but there's a sub window there. And we simply click, are you sure you want to go offline? Yes, I'm sure. Then we come back to the mod manager and we simply select Launch. Now it's going to apply the mods to our FC26 game. Depending on your operating system, it may take a while, it may be very quick. But like I said, this is a version of the mod manager that is a lot faster than it used to be on previous games. Particularly when it's your first time installing said mods, it may take the longest time. It's now applying them for the first time to our FC26 game. We'll come back when that finishes and we'll see if they've taken effect. Now, the first thing you may notice is that the background graphics have changed. This is a good indicator that the mod has applied, and we can obviously see that the splash screen has also changed. So far we know that the Realism mod has applied. Assuming so far this is the only mod you want to install, the most important thing we need to do is to load the assigned squads file. For this mod, to ensure that the database and squad files talk to each other and all the player faces, tattoos, kit assignments and so forth are correctly assigned, we need to tab out of this for just a moment and go back to our patches folder for the FIFA Realism mod. You see down here at the bottom is what's called a squads file. We're going to need that, so we'll copy it, and we're going to find our FC26 settings folder stored on our PC. I have a pre-saved file path to this shortcuts folder on my desktop. You'll find this under this file path, under users, your name, app data, local, and if you did it correctly, you'll find EA Sports FC26. Enter this and we'll enter the settings folder. This is where it's going to load all of your profile, game settings and your squad files. We take the squads file that we copied from the FIFA Realism mod and we'll paste it in here. Let's go back to our game and we're going to go up to the in-game settings. Enter profile and we will load the squads. We can see that the custom FIFA's FC26 Realism mod squad file is here. We simply load this, and just to make sure, we're going to save over it. This was an issue on previous FC games where you would load these squad files, and every time you booted the game back up, it wouldn't store the loaded squad file. So to counteract that, we would save over it. What we can do to check that the Realism mod has worked, we can go back to the settings and click on Edit Real Players. The first thing we see is that Alisson has already been amended with his long hair. We can scroll through and check on some players, such as Dominic Szoboszlai. He has his new hairstyle. We can do this for any team we like. Lamens has his face applied. If we go down to Dorgu, we'll see he has a custom face applied. We could go to Italy, and we can see that the likes of AS Roma, Atalanta, Inter Milan, and so on, are now licensed and they have their real kits, names and badges. So we know that the FIFA Realism mod is working correctly. Let's close the game and try to install some other mods. Now something I like to do, I like to install something called separators. In my graphics folder, this is where I placed them. These are just for the sake of convenience for us. Essentially, all they are dashes in our mod manager. We don't affect anything else in game. It is just to keep things nice, neat and uniform and organized in our mod manager tool. Let's say I want to install the gameplay mod. Anthony James gameplay mod comes with two folders, standalone and options. Let's go with the current version and we'll simply start on regular, just for the sake of example. I'm going to load my regular gameplay standalone mod, hit apply, And what I like to do, I suggest keeping the gameplay folder at the top of your mod manager list. What I mean by this is that the mod manager works in order of priority. Anything down here at the bottom, at number 1, will take the highest priority. It will be loaded and it will overwrite whatever else is in this mod manager list. That may be at number 3, 4, 9 and so on. But because the gameplay mod doesn't affect much else, I like to keep it as the lowest priority all the way up here at the top of the gameplay list. What I'm going to do is grab another separator and I'm going to place it here. Another thing to note, you may want to play with your regular standalone on its own, and that's perfectly fine. If you do want to experiment with the options, there are some things to consider. Let's say we want to play with a bigger ball. We can take this larger ball option, load it and apply it. The most important thing to remember is that the main gameplay mod must always be above your option mods. In my case, so it's easy to understand, my regular gameplay standalone is all the way at the top here, the lowest priority in my mod manager at number 11. Any of my gameplay options have to go below this, and they will take priority and overwrite some of these settings and variables in the main regular gameplay mod. The important thing with the gameplay mod, some of these options may conflict, which means they'll cancel each other out. For example, if we go back to our gameplay mod folder, in the options, you'll see this. Many different options corresponding to many different areas of gameplay modding. If we were to go into our ball physics options, we will see we have more options here, such as more curve and dip and slightly more curve and dip. Slightly will be just a touch more curve and dip, whereas more curve and dip would obviously be the most impactful version. In each folder for the relevant mod file, you'll find a README document. This usually has a self-contained explanation of how each gameplay mod option works. Some of these may advise that they can't be used with other options. It's important to read these. Some of you may stockpile a lot of these gameplay option mods in your mod manager and then can't figure out why you're having issues in your gameplay. In the main gameplay README, it does explain all of these essential settings for your gameplay mod, and I will cover these as they apply mine. I'm going to come back to the gameplay options later on in this video and show you my current personal gameplay setup of choice. But for now, as an example, we'll leave these two options here, the regular gameplay mod and the larger ball, and we're going to see those take place in game after they've been enabled. Now, going back to the order of all the other mods, if you want to use other patches on top of your FIFER Realism mod, such as the eSim patch and the Roads Kit expansion mod, there is a specific order you will need to install these so that they don't crash or conflict. Let's start with the eSim mod. Now we open this folder and we see the main eSim mod files. I'm going to highlight all of these and press open. I'm going to select them all and I'm going to hit apply. Based on what we've learned, these are now lower down in my mod list priority order. This means they'll take priority over the FIFER Realism mod. Most of these may not necessarily overwrite what's in the FIFER Realism mod. Some of them will, such as boots and gloves, the gripper socks. Some of these won't, such as the color grading and the no fan flags option. Player shadows, set piece cameras, ultra low shocks. However, there are additional mod files to the eSim mod. In these folders, you may want to choose your camera mod of choice. Here we have custom, which means you can customize the variables of the zoom and height to your own choosing. We have these default ones which automatically assign them to the realistic broadcast camera settings per team and per stadium. The difference between 1A and 1B and 2A and 2B is merely how much the camera zooms in and out on the penalty area during attacks and defending sequences in game. I'm going to load 1A for an example, and if you want to be sure what it does, you can highlight the mod here on the left, and over on the right you can click on the description and it'll explain what the mod does itself. You can see that the mod says it zooms in. I'm going to apply that mod and add it down here. The next one from eSim I'm going to apply is the goal nets mod. When we open this, it's important to consider some of these you can only use one at a time, and it's relevant to the mod you are using. We can see here, as I'm using the Anthony James gameplay mod, I need to select the goal nets mod relevant to the Anthony James gameplay mod. I'm going to go with regular. Hit apply and send that to my list. The next thing I need to do for the goal nets is add the depth assignment. If you're using the eSim mod on its own, you just need the depth assignment here. Once again, if you're using the FIFA Realism mod like we're using, you need the depth assignment for the FIFA Realism mod. This is just to ensure that the assignments correspond to the correct database and IDs used in both mods. Finally, any add-ons you see here, such as the base frame mods, can only be used one at a time. Napoli's blue base frame or Dortmund's, they may clash with each other. However, I'm going to use the goal net patterns add-on, which applies the correct goal net patterns per team. So for example, Ajax will have the red stripe down the center, Dortmund will have black and yellow goal nets, Benfica will have red and white goal nets, so on and so forth. We'll apply those. And once again, going back to eSim, something I personally like to use is the immersive indicators. It's all down to your own personal preference, but I like to remove the ball bounce marker, and the HUD, and the player indicator. I like to have as little on-screen clutter as possible, and I want it to look as realistic as a football broadcast. Next up from eSim is the turf files. There's quite a few to choose from here. Your main turf mod and the recommended one is the Turf's Real gameplay mod. I'm going to apply that. And going back to this, you'll see some add-ons such as long grass, a dark pitch color, no footprints, very high footprints, and there is even an EA style variation of the original Turf's Real mod. Now I personally don't use any of these add-ons, it's down to your own personal preference. But next, what I'm going to do is put them in alphabetical order, because that's how I roll. Just to keep things neat and organized, like I mentioned earlier. and I also strongly recommend you do the same. Now we can see that is the correct setup for your eSim mod, and these are the options that I personally choose. We can add another separator underneath, because now we are done with eSim. Now, moving on to the roads kit expansion. For those that don't know, the roads kit expansion mod basically adds additional kits, kit numbers and fonts, and mix and match kit variations, so you can mix up the shorts and socks variations per teams to ensure there is no clashing whatsoever. Once again, as we're already using the FIFA Realism mod, I'm going to use the version that is relevant to the FIFA version. I'll apply this underneath both of those. Going back to the kits expansion mod, you may find you want to use some of these add-ons. First of all, goalkeeper variants. This just means you may want Chelsea to have a black or a green goalkeeper kit, Barcelona to have a purple goalkeeper kit, and so on. In game there is only one goalkeeper kit, so we do have to assign these manually if we want a variation. If I was to select both of these Chelsea ones and apply them, for example, as I mentioned earlier in the video, the one that is lowest in the mod list on the right will take priority over the one above it. Now, as they are both goalkeeper kits for the same club and the same ID, the black one will take priority over the green one as it's lower down in my mod manager list. And the green one won't show in game. So you have to choose which one you want to use. If you do, open up both of these and you can simply remove one by going to the cross over here on the right, and that will remove it from your mod manager loader list. The next thing to note is, again, depending on what mod you are using, you need to use the relevant squads file. So, Roads Kit Expansion mod, there is a squad file that is compatible with just the Roads mod on its own. Or if you're using the FIFA mod and the Roads mod, you can use this one. However, as I'm using the FIFA mod, Roads mod and the eSim mod, I need a squad file that encompasses all three of those patches. Now, eSim normally has the most comprehensive squad file folder. As we can see here, eSim has their own exclusive squad file. They have one compatible with eSim and FIFER, one compatible with the Roads Kit expansion, and finally one that's compatible with eSim, FIFER and the Roads Kit expansion, which is the one I need as I'm using all three of those mod patches. So, we enter this folder and we copy that file. Going back to the eSim squads folder, he's helpfully included a shortcut to the squad root. I showed you where it is earlier, but just to save you time, you can simply click on this shortcut and it will take you directly to where your squad files are saved. I've already loaded the FIFA Realism mod squad folder earlier, and now I overwrite it, and I can simply delete that one and replace it with the updated eSim, FIFA and the Roads Kit expansion squad file. Now let's quickly test what we have so far. We have the Anthony James Realism gameplay mod with a large ball option. We have the FIFA Realism mod. We have the eSim collections. And finally the Roads Kit expansion mod. Let's just make sure we can go ahead and test this. One more thing before we do this, something else I recommend to do, is even though the FIFA mod manager automatically deletes what is known as a temp file, aka the live tuning update from EA, a supplementary file that releases slight tweaks to the gameplay variables, and as we're using the Anthony James gameplay mod, we don't want this live tuning update to interfere with this mod. We're already in offline mode, so EA shouldn't download anything to our game as we play it. But in our temp folder, under this file path here, user, your name, app data, local, temp, this is where you'll find your live tuning update is contained in this EA Sports FC26 folder. What I do, I simply delete that folder. You won't break anything by doing so, but just to make sure you're doing it in the temp folder, check that file path and not your local folder where your in-game settings are stored. Now, let's go back to the mod manager and we're going to launch the game with these new mods. Okay, so we're back in our game. Once again, we need to go back to the settings and we need to load our new squads. So as you can see here, FIFER's Alpha 4, Roads Kit expansion and the eSim mod squad file is there. We need to load that save, overwrite it just to make sure. So to check the changes are enabled, and knowing that the eSim and the Roads Kit expansion mods are visual mods, we can test this. By selecting our teams in the menu, such as Man United and Manchester City, and we can already see that the alternative kits have been loaded in. The shorts and socks variations are present. We can see black shorts and socks for United, white shorts and socks, so on and so forth. Now that we know that the kit expansion is working, we can go ahead and load up a match. We can already see at a glance that the new winter match ball is loaded. This is part of the eSim mod. We can also see that the player indicators and the power bars are gone. We can also see that the match ball is slightly larger, which is a good indication that the Anthony James gameplay mod is working as intended. And finally, we can see the new goal net shape of the eSim mod, with the tighter settings as demonstrated by Erling Haaland. Okay, so heading back to the mod manager, we're going to add some supplemental mods that have also been featured in the download list. Let's go back to our mods folder, and perhaps we want to add in the Marconis mods. Marconis mods encompasses cameras, an immersive HUD, sponsors mod, and of course, goalnet mods as well as the in-game generated mini faces. You may want to use some of his mods, but if you do, what I'm going to show you is that once of all, we're going to use the Anthony James gameplay mod folder, and let's say we want to use the Retro Nets mod. So we can see clearly how that works. We'll go ahead and apply them, add another separator, so that we keep the Marconis mod separate from the other mods in our collection. What we need to do, even though this is low in priority, it'll overwrite the goalnet assignment, but just to make sure there is no conflicts, we're going to go ahead and disable eSim's goalnets by unticking it. We don't need to remove it from the mod list. We can simply untick it and that will disable the mod. This is useful if you just want to go and test different mods without having to delete the mod and then reopen the folder and reinstall it and reapply it. So now that we have the Retro Goalnet mod installed, let's test something else. What I like to use from Marconis mods is the in-game generated mini faces. And this basically means that the player portraits that you see in the team management screen will now be replaced by in-game renders of the players from the FIFA mod patch. This ensures that there is a cohesive and consistent look amongst the player renders in our team management settings. The next one I'm going to add is our sound mods. We head to the sound folder and we open Kiarika's Anthem and Goal Song mods. The Anthem mods are essentially the walkout music for the corresponding leagues. And the Goal Song mods is self-explanatory. It's the song that plays when the home team scores a goal. Now I'm going to select all of these Anthem mods and apply them here at the bottom. I'm going to apply the Goal Song mod. As you can see, I've applied it. Now, because these mods are made by the same author, Kiarika, and they are sound mods, I'm going to group them all together and place another separator underneath them. What I'm going to do next is add Kiarika's career mode overhaul and the optimization overhaul. The career mode overhaul is self-explanatory, and as I'm using the FIFER mod, I'm going to use these two files. What you may find, some of these, there is a compatible file with the relevant patch, and if we read the description on the right, we can ensure that this is compatible with the chosen patch, of which in this case is the FIFA mod. The optimization overhaul is basically a PC performance mod. It ensures that the game loads the essential amount of textures and render data and graphical assets, ensuring that we have the smoothest performance possible without compromising the graphical fidelity too much. It may stop the player's shirts from moving as such, it may lower the detail of some of the crowd models, and even some of the hair strand effects. But it's a trade-off and is entirely optional depending on your in-game graphical settings. The Plus version reduces this a lot more, which means that the level of detail on some of those models may be even more noticeable. So we may have PlayStation 1 style crowd models, but it's at the trade-off of performance and stability. Let's go with the Plus version just to test it as an example and see what it looks like in game. So I've added the Kiarika mods collection. I've added the sound mods, and I'm going to add another separator underneath that. Delete the temp folder once again, just to make sure it doesn't cause any issues. And then I'm going to launch the game. The first thing we see is that the Kiarika mod is loaded because the splash screen has now changed once again. Of course, the Kiarika mod is higher in priority in the mod loader. We can enter another game to ensure the changes have been made. We can check our team management and we can see the player portraits have been replaced by the in-game generated faces. Looks very classy, doesn't it? We can also see that the goal nets have been updated. They have the retro sag as promised by Marconis, and the optimization mod has improved the performance and the frame rate significantly. And now Victor Gyökeres is going to demonstrate the physics of the retro goal net, so we know for certain that it has applied and it has worked. It looks fantastic in motion. As promised, I'm going to go back to the gameplay mod section, and it's recommended with new players to start with the regular standalone version of the Anthony James gameplay mod, see how you feel with it, and then you may experiment with some of the options to see how you can tweak the gameplay to your liking. We go to the current version folder, and you're going to find 4 tiers. Regular, which is what we started off with, a slower version of the general gameplay base, and then we have fluid flow and slow flow. These basically ensure there's a bit more of a fluid and seamless transition between inertia and animations and linking and gameplay. Now, I already know personally what I like to use as I've tested these before, and I'm going to personally go with the slow flow as my preferred standalone version. I'm going to go ahead and drop this all the way to my gameplay section at the top. Now, instead of disabling this, you may want to remove it entirely from your mod list just to keep things organized. I also know what options I like to use as I have also tested these. The important thing to remember about your gameplay mod options, some people tend to think they need to add as many of these as possible to create this incredibly unique and immersive gameplay experience. No. The important thing to remember is that all of these options are already adjusted in your standalone gameplay mod. What the options do is that they simply enhance these slightly further and make them more pronounced, more aggressive, or reduce some of the adjustments made in the standalone gameplay mod. So just because there's an option for attacking options, it doesn't mean that it doesn't exist already to a degree in the standalone gameplay mod. Everything gameplay wise has been adjusted already in your standalone mod. This is just if you want to enhance or reduce the effects of some of these areas. Now, the first thing I do is I go to ball physics, and I always select the more curve and dip option. I personally feel like this could be enhanced further than the standalone game, but it's just personal preference. Some people might think that the curve and dip is just fine in a standalone package, but I like it a bit more exaggerated. I also tend to increase the roll, because I do like the passes to travel a bit further up the pitch, and for the ball to have a bit more of a mind of its own. Now again, the increased roll has already been applied in the standalone version, so I'm going to go with the increased roll setting. Coming out of the ball options, I tend to leave the attacking options as they are, as I personally think they're just fine. Some people do like to increase the run frequency, the attacking reaction times. There is also an alternative attack option, which basically gives you a slightly different set of attacking variables and behaviors to what is in the gameplay standalone. I'm going to go into defensive options. And I tend to increase the intense marking option. Moving on to goalkeepers, I feel that the goalkeepers are slightly too strong. And even in Anthony's standalone gameplay mod, I still find them too reliable. Goalkeepers almost have an answer for everything. This might seem drastic, as I always go for the significantly weaker goalkeeper option. And the reason for that is that I find the goalkeepers near enough unstoppable, and with this on, they're still very good, very strong, and very hard to beat. But they are also a bit more lifelike and human and vulnerable than they are in the vanilla game or the standalone gameplay mod. Next, I go to pass speed. I go for the slightly slower pass option, just so the ball moves around a bit more believably on the pitch, and it's not zipping around and an attack on the senses of the eye. On to positioning options. Now in the standalone, it's generally quite neutral. This This is where your personal preference may come into play. Some people prefer a more compact positioning style, so players are a lot more closer and bunched up together, which creates a tighter feeling on the pitch, and some people want more space across the field, which doesn't necessarily make things easier, it just means that players have more ground to cover when it comes to how they defend. I personally use the ball side positioning base. This means that depending on the side of the pitch that the ball finds itself in, the rest of the players will gravitate towards it and will move up to that area of the pitch. A lot of these gameplay options are covered in my gameplay video. That I will show on the screen in the corner. Moving on to shot speed, I personally have it on reduced shot speed subtle. Just takes a little bit of the rocket ping off some of the shots. And finally, into the other options. Some of you may find the set pieces in the standalone gameplay mod may have an issue where not many players come up for set pieces. You may see that there's only 3 players in the box in a set piece such as a corner kick. If we like, we can go into the original set pieces option that reverts the set piece system to how it is in the vanilla game, which may give us slightly more players in the penalty area on corner kicks. For the rest of the options, they are all down to your personal preference. As I mentioned earlier, each folder in your gameplay mod package, there is a README document which offers an explanation on what the gameplay mod option does, and what it's recommended to use it with or without, what it may or may not be compatible with. Always make sure your standalone mod is above your options in your gameplay list on the right of your mod manager. I strongly recommend you read these PDF files as they contain essential settings, which I'm going to cover some of them in the video in just a moment. It also explains what the new version of the gameplay mod has added, as well as what some of the new options that have been created for your gameplay experience. I strongly recommend reading all of these for your essential learning. And I'm going to round off this installation guide, looking at the in-game gameplay settings and testing some of these gameplay options I've just installed. They'll end up in the bottom of my list, which is fine where they are, but as I mentioned earlier, I like to group them together with the gameplay mods section in my mod manager list and have them in alphabetical order. The other reason why it's important to keep these as the lowest priority is that they go above the eSim mod collection. So, particularly if you're using the eSim's GoalNets mod and you're using the Anthony James gameplay version, this is important because if he wasn't using the Anthony James gameplay version of his GoalNets mod, the net physics will just spaz. So we need to ensure we have the correct goal nets for the gameplay version we're using or not using. Finally, make sure that this order is exactly as you see. I'll be placing the mod order list in the description of the video, but you can pause this video and scroll through slowly just to make sure everything lines up in your mod manager as it does with mine. Now let's launch the game for a final time. Once again, making sure we delete that live tuning update from the temp folder. Hitting the launch button. And let's go through the gameplay settings for the Anth James gameplay mod. First of all, it's all down to personal preference what your controller settings would be. I personally play on manual. As you can see, I'm going to scroll through my controller settings and you can match yours up to mine if you like. However, you may want to play on semi or you may like to play on assisted. It's not too impactful, it's just down to personal preference. Moving on to match, it's recommended to play the gameplay mod at 10-minute halves and world-class difficulty. It's the difficulty and the time setting that the gameplay mod is usually tested on. However, it is okay to play on professional or legendary if you're a masochist. We set the attributes to classic and the player-based difficulty on. And of course the rest are just aesthetic settings. Moving on to game type, the most important thing is that we set it to custom. And authenticity features off. The reason why is that for the gameplay mod to work, authenticity mode applies some restrictions to what the gameplay variables can be achieved with the gameplay mod. So Anthony has chosen this to be set to the custom mode and the authenticity features set to off. As well as it being recommended to turn the weather effects off, such as the wind and the weather effects menus, just so there's no strange behaviors on the ball in gameplay. Moving down to the sliders, it's also strongly recommended to set all of these manually to 50. The gameplay mod has been tested on the settings mentioned above and applied appropriately to 50 sliders. Personally, when it comes to injuries, until there's a gameplay option for this, I have personally set my injury frequency to 80. This is just so that players who get fouled quite heavily at least sell the reaction of being hurt. It may not necessarily make them injured and have to be substituted off in the match because the severity is left at 50, but it's a personal preference just to make sure they don't get bumped on the floor from a vicious tackle and then spring straight up and run on. Everything else remains at 50. Finally, moving on to the CPU sliders, we must also set the AI behavior to custom and all of these to 50 as well, to ensure neutrality amongst the backdrop of how the gameplay mod has been tested. Now, as I'm using the eSim broadcast camera mod, I have my broadcast camera set to default in the custom camera settings. You could change this to custom and skewer them however you like, but I personally leave it on default as the camera height and zoom settings are assigned exclusively to each team and stadium, ensuring the most realistic depiction of the broadcast experience from the camera mod. If you're using the immersion HUD like I am, which means that all of the HUD elements such as your player indicator, ball marker, so on and so forth are switched off, you need to ensure that the player name bar is enabled. I know that sounds unusual. Having it on disabled will still ensure some elements will show up, such as the player indicators. Have the player name bar unenabled and it will make sure that the player names above their heads will disappear and there is no player name bar on the bottom of your screen if you want that immersive cinematic television experience. Moving on to goal nets, set your goal nets as default if you're using the eSim goal net assignment, because once again these are custom assigned to each team and stadium. Messing around with the net shape, tight will make the nets narrow, loose will make the nets deep. But on default it means that they are applied correctly to each stadium. And if you followed along exactly as I showed you, you will have a crash-free and compatible modded FC26 experience and enjoy FC26 the way it should be played, enhanced and alive. And if this tutorial helps you out, then please thank me by just simply subscribing and liking the video. Leave a comment below if you have any issues and any troubleshooting concerns, and I'll do my best to help you. This is my first tutorial video, and if you'd like to see more tutorial videos for football gaming modding, let me know which game you want me to do a tutorial on below, and I will do my best. Wherever you are in the world, happy gaming, and thank you for watching.